Comic Book Savant, episode 361.
I know this. This I know. All that I have, all that is me, resides inside my poetry. And every time I write a rhyme, it might be the line that sets minds free. And also, I know that I don't...
Welcome to the Comic Book Savant podcast. I'm your host, James Harris. This week, it is all about Star Wars The Last Jedi. This is going to be a full spoiler review of the movie. So if you haven't had a chance to see the movie, please stop the podcast right now. Head over to youtube.com/comic book savant, and you can see my non-spoiler movie review there if you haven't and you're on the fence about if you want to see the movie or not. If you have seen the movie and you want to know my thoughts and dig deep into full spoilers, then continue on from this point. That is your preemptive spoiler warning at this point. With that out of the way, as always, I'd like to give a shout out to my friends over at the Comics Podcast Network, which you can find over at comicspodcast.com. It's just the place if you like the content that you get over here at comicbooksavant.com. This is a one-stop shop portal for a bunch of comic book podcasters that came together, have this site where we just all put our different shows there so fans can go, or that are looking for related content as far as the world of comic books and the comic book industry. You can go one place and find literally hundreds of different comic book related podcasts and video shows all there in one spot, which is a great thing. It's been around for roughly about 10 years or so now, and it started off with maybe like 20 of us, and now there are literally hundreds, and it's constantly growing. So it's more new shows being added to the Comics Podcast Network all the time. Again, you can find podcasts like myself, which is a single person podcast. You can find roundtable shows, just all different types of varieties. If you want to find something on a particular publisher, it's podcasts related to just a particular publisher, team, character, you name it, you should be able to find it there at the Comics Podcast Network. Again, the site is comicspodcast.com. And again, it's just a great resource. So again, if you like what I do here and you want to find more related content, take a moment to stop by there. It will definitely be worth it for you. And last but not least, I'd like to give a shout out to the sponsor for this episode and every episode, which is InStockTrades.com, one of the best places you can go online when it just comes to finding collected editions, trade paperbacks, Marvel Masterworks, Absolute Editions, you name it, you can find it over on InStockTrades.com. They have one of the most expansive inventory collections that you're going to find around. It's very rare that I can't find something that I'm looking for there. And sometimes if you email them and you ask them about it, they might be able to pull it to get it for you. So don't ever hesitate to do that as well. They have discounts starting off as low as 35% off, 42%, and as high as 50% off on certain items. They have a daily deals of the week that's on the homepage of the site at InStockTrades.com. It's updated weekly. I want to say it's updated like every Tuesday or Wednesday with new books. They can highlight up to 5, sometimes up as I've seen as many as 10 different books highlighted up to 50% off. So definitely be on the lookout for that. And if you place an order $50 or more and you are a U.S. customer, you get free shipping within the U.S. Unfortunately, if you happen to listen to this podcast and you're an international listener, you still get all the great savings, but you don't get that extra bonus. Again, that's only for U.S. customers, but they do have some of the most competitive and reasonable international shipping rates around, so you can still save a ton and come out like a bandit. So don't let that deter you from potentially using the service because of that. Now, with all that said and all of that out of the way, let's get into Star Wars The Last Jedi. I have been anticipating this movie for a while. You guys know that have been any long-time listeners of the show that I'm a huge fan of the Star Wars movie series. And I was waiting to get a lot of these questions answered that were opened up in Star Wars The Force Awakens. And so I was really just on the edge of my seat waiting to see this film. Again, The Last Jedi was written and directed by Rian Johnson, which is best known for Looper, as well as a movie he did some years ago, both starring Gordon Joseph Levitt, which was Brick, as well as Looper, both starring him. The breakdown for the movie The Last Jedi is as follows. Having taken their first steps into the Jedi world, Rey joins Luke Skywalker on an adventure with Leia, Finn, Poe that unlocks mysteries of the Force and secrets of the past. And as the cast is pretty much the whole returning cast from the first movie. We have Daisy Ridley back as Rey, Mark Hamill back as Luke Skywalker, Carrie Fisher as Leia in her final performance. With her untimely passing shortly after she finished filming her scenes for the movie. Oscar Isaac as Poe, Adam Driver back as Kylo Ren, Gwendolyn Christie as Captain Phasma, John Boyega as Finn, Andy Serkis as Supreme Leader Snoke. I hope I pronounced this correct. Dunhall Gleason back as General Hux, and introducing Kelly Marie Tran as Rose. And just going into this off the top, again, full spoilers here, for the movie. I think this movie will hit people in a different way. I mean, the movie's been out now. It made over $220 million this opening weekend, which is phenomenal. It didn't catch Force Awakens, which made like $245 million this opening weekend, but it wasn't far behind it. And I think a lot of people speculated that it wasn't going to do nearly as well. I'm kind of surprised I kind of felt like it probably would hit over 200, but like 220. I was kind of blown away by the numbers that it produced, but it is a good movie. It has its faults. It's not a perfect movie, but I don't think any of the Star Wars movies have been perfect. They all had their well, no, I'm not going to say that, because I think Empire Strikes Back is probably the only perfect movie, because it is my favorite, and it still, yes, remains to be my favorite, even after this movie was released. Out of all the Star Wars movies, I think that is probably the closest movie to perfection in my mind is Empire Strikes Back. This movie does have its faults, so I will say that right off the bat. But I feel like when speaking about Rian Johnson, he took some risks, man. Like he went for it, and I appreciate that, especially coming off of The Force Awakens, which is a good movie. And I enjoyed it, and I made sure I watched it a few days leading up to going to see this movie, so just everything was fresh in my mind. And I actually seem to like The Force Awakens more now. It's grown on me more over time, which I've always liked it, and I gave it a fairly decent rating because I enjoyed it. But I enjoyed it more now with a little bit more context and time, because I hadn't watched The Force Awakens in quite a while. But it made me appreciate even more. That did, suffer from being a lot of stuff rehashed to get people back familiar with the Star Wars world and what the Skywalker saga is all about. This here, Rian Johnson really took some chances and took some risks and pushed some things in a different direction. And a lot of questions that were thrown out by J.J. Abrams coming off of The Force Awakens, Johnson took those questions and answered a lot of them, but answered them in a way that most people weren't anticipating, and I kind of like that. In certain cases, it worked better than others, but he was ballsy enough to take some risk and do something different and not be cookie cutter. And I appreciate Kathleen Kennedy and Disney giving him the freedom to just let it rip and to try to do something and take it in another direction. Because if we were going to keep having the same cookie cutter over and over again in every movie, then you might as well let George Lucas have kept it, and we would have had the same movie over and over again, or following a lot of similar tropes. So I do like that they let him do something different. With that being said, I feel like this movie is polarizing. I feel like it's not too many people that's going to fall in the middle. Either you're going to love this movie or you're going to hate this movie. I don't think it's very polarizing in that way, because he made some bold moves that we're going to talk about a little bit later. But I don't think it's anything wrong with it. For the things that didn't work, he did 2-3 things that I really did enjoy, or just left me with my mouth just like gaping open, like they really just did that, and was like, wow. So I do appreciate him for that. But again, it's far from a perfect movie. One of the things from the beginning, and I'm just going because I'm focusing on the direction at this point, since I was going in talking about Rian Johnson, is that one thing he did from the very beginning of the movie, I love the opening crawl in the beginning scene, but in the first half of the movie particularly, it's something small, but I'm a huge movie fan and a movie buff, and if any of you guys ever used to listen to my old podcast, Pop Media Savant, where I just did straight movie reviews, just a huge overall fan of movies and the process of making movies, just as much as I'm a fan of comics. And the thing that was jarring to me at the very beginning of the movie was how Ryan decided to transition from scene to scene. There's a certain thing in the transitioning when you're cutting from one scene to another in the different Star Wars movies. It just has a little old slide transition, and it's just Star Wars. It's just inherent in the Star Wars movies that they always kind of kept there. And he didn't do that. He just did rough, quick cuts with no transition for the first half of the movie. But then it was funny. It was in like when it got to like the halfway point of the movie to the end, he went back to that traditional Star Wars style. So in the beginning of the movie, a lot was going on, and there was a lot of jumping from character to character, scene to scene, and it just was very abrupt, like jumpy cuts to me, that it even made it more frantic than what it needed to be. Where that simple little transition effect between scenes is just, oh, now we're going to another character, where here it just jumped to the next character, where it was like, where's Rey? And it just jumped to Rey, and without transition, and it was like, where's Han? And it jumped to Leia, and it was just really phonetic, and it was kind of unnecessary, and it kind of made me jumpy as a viewer viewing it, because it was just, again, it was something subtle, but it meant a lot. Just like with Rogue One, when they took the crawl out, it's not Star Warsy. Like those little things, they're little things, but sometimes they can mean a lot when you're a fan of the franchise, and it's something that just always been there. You'll notice it when it's gone. And I feel like another thing with Rian Johnson, with the choices that he made and how he handled the content and how he wrote this story, I felt like this has probably been the most thought-provoking of the Star Wars movies that we've seen to date. He really questioned, like it said in a breakdown, about the mysteries of the Force and secrets of the past. He really gave you, like, it took me a day or two after watching the movie, and I hope probably over the holiday season I'll go back and get a chance to go to the theaters and watch the movie again, where it was really, it really gave you a lot to think about, and with so much going on during the course of the movie that I feel like it bears watching again. It was definitely something where I was like, I could watch that again. Helps when you don't hit the microphone. Sorry about that. I talk with my hands. If you've ever watched my YouTube channel, you see all I do is talk with my hands. Big black man, talk with his hands. Very aggressive. It definitely gave you a lot to chew on, and I like that. I like thinking movies. I liken it to the first Matrix movie. When you came out of that movie, you knew you saw something different, and it just kept your mind going, thinking about the movie. And it couldn't just be like, hey, I score this movie this. Like a lot of times when I go see a movie, by the time I see the movie and I walk out, by the time I come home, because I immediately will come home from watching a movie, like me and my wife will talk about the movie, like after we leave the movie, all on the way home, and then I'll pretty much start writing notes and bullet points on what I want to talk about when I sit down to record the review of the movie. I'll start doing that prep work then, and I couldn't do it. Like I literally sat and slept on it, and then most of the next day, and then I was able to start building my notes for what I was going to talk about in this review. So it definitely wasn't one of those easy movies and pieces that's like, oh, this is a blah, blah, blah score, and this is why. It was a lot more going on. Another thing I have to say about Rian Johnson, this has to be one of the most visually striking and stunning Star Wars movies that we've seen throughout all of the different Star Wars movies. He definitely had some great eye-popping, visuals in space, as well as on the different planets that he had a chance to show us, which I loved. Now, getting into the acting side, it's enough talking to being on Rian Johnson. He did a great job. And, and one last closing point on that, they announced before this movie was ever released that, he's going to be doing his own trilogy in a different time frame with all new characters in the Star Wars universe, maybe in a different galaxy, which I wouldn't mind seeing, because with what I saw in this movie, it has me more interested to see what he would do with the story all of his own with new characters, how it might play off in what time period and everything that he would tackle. So I'm interested to see where that might go. And with this movie opening at $220 million, I think we're definitely going to see that, but we don't have any information at this point. It was just a preliminary announcement that they are giving him his trilogy, and he's supposed to be writing all three movies. He said in interviews when he's doing a press for this that he doesn't know if he's going to direct all three movies. More than likely, he's going to direct the first one. So it'll be interesting to see in the coming year or so where that ends up landing, and when we might get that first movie and try to get some more information. But he's just in the beginning stages of coming up with concepts and stories that we know of at this point. He might be further along, but they're just not ready to let us know anything because this movie's just coming out right now. So time will tell on that. But away from that, the acting, I'll have to say I really loved Kelly Marie Tran, her as Rose. I thought her character was like kind of the heart and soul of the group of characters on the Resistance side. Loved her chemistry with Finn. I felt like the story arc, because one of the things that I've heard consistently from fans and different people alike and saw in different reviews, that people didn't like the middle part of the movie, felt like the movie slowed down quite a bit, and they didn't like the arc that they took Finn and Rose on. And I thought their chemistry was great, but necessarily didn't care for how they were utilizing that middle scene. But I felt like, even though it was probably the weakest part of the movie to me, I enjoyed it for a particular reason. And so many people dogged this portion of the movie when they went to Canto Bight, went to the planet looking for the slicer or the hacker. Was, they was just like, oh, they didn't like the planet. The practical effects took them out of it. It felt like a lot of other different movies. I dug it because with Star Wars, it does address current issues at times. They always have, even with the prequels with George Lucas with politics, even though it just wasn't executed properly. It was genius because politics were attached to Star Wars, and he went back in the prequels and kind of showed that, but it was just not executed the best, which hurt the prequels in a lot of sense. But if it was handled better, it could have went off like gangbusters, and he had all the right intentions, but just not the right execution on it. So it was good to see that we had to understand, because Finn is the main character, because we're just in this arc between him and Rose, because he's a returning character, she's a totally new character. And she even says when she meets him that she already has this huge crush on him as a hero, and he inspired her and her sister that I'm going to talk about in a moment, that died in the opening scene, which was a beautiful war scene, that he inspired them to join. If he was able to leave the First Order to join the Resistance and to fight on the side of good and almost risk his life to do so, that they could join in and do their part. That we have to understand that Finn, what we learned from in the first movie, that Finn was taken from his parents at a young age, put into this stormtrooper program, and brainwashed. And his first action was that beginning scene. He's heard of things, and he's traveled far within the First Order and seen certain things and heard different things about the galaxy, but he hasn't experienced them firsthand. So I thought this scene was very important to the development of Finn's character, that he's seeing the world for the first time and being able to see this over decadent, like Monaco / Las Vegas type place, that where we learn from gosh, I'm forgetting the name, DJ, the DJ character, that, you know, these people are war profiteering and they sell to both sides, and it's a bigger world than just being resistance or first order. And it's a whole bunch of people that are profiting off of war profiteering, and they're living like fat cats while everybody's out there fighting for the freedoms or trying to take over the world. It's a whole other different dirty side to it. And I thought that was important because Finn hadn't been exposed to all that. So it was an eye-opening thing, which I felt like it was important because all of these things he saw in this scene and with his interaction with DJ led him to finally commit to becoming resistance, and gave him something to fight for a change instead of just running. He just, in the first movie and even at the beginning of this movie, he wants to run. So I felt like that scene, though was not executed the best, was vitally important to Finn's development as a character, and having Rose there, you know, even added more heart and built up their chemistry together and showed how important her character is as being kind of the heart, emotional compass or conscience of the group, or his conscience that needed to help him view things bigger. And it's not about running away. It's about, you know, facing and understanding what they're actually fighting for and what they're willing to risk their lives for. So I really liked that part, and I'm glad that it ultimately pushes him to finally choose a side, to not run away, but to stand up and fight against the First Order as a rebel or with the resistance. I really like that. Rose is a very nice addition to the cast. I like to see where they go and develop her up more in the next movie, in episode 9. It'll definitely be interesting to see how they flesh her out, and also where they might go with the whole relationship angle. You know, we knew from the very beginning scene where Rose meets Finn that she kind of hero worshipped him, and, you know, you definitely tell by the kiss scene that kind of threw me off guard towards the end of the movie, when Finn was going to sacrifice himself to kind of take down the battering ram, and she, you know, risked herself to save him, and then she, you know, jumps up and kisses him before passing out. You know, I feel like that could have been built up a little bit better if they had a few more in the Canto Bight scenes. You know, they were showing so much about, you know, kids being enslaved and animal cruelty. They got a little heavy-handed with the righteousness there, and I felt like Rian Johnson, in an offhanded way, was trying to do a homage to how Princess Leia and Han's relationship developed in those slow moments on their side mission in Empire Strikes Back, kind of in this movie, but in a different way. And I liked Canto Bight because it was showing us something we had never seen in the Star Wars universe with this Monaco, Vegas, you know, place. But I felt like it wasn't enough slow, quiet moments between them where they were talking about things and it could have been some tension built up there, like with Han and Leia, to kind of see where, okay, maybe in this attraction brewing between these two, outside of her just hero's admiration or her hero's crush on him, because it totally came off when she kissed him as one-sided. It kind of shifts a little bit more because his focus in the whole beginning of the movie was like, where's Rey, and him running away to try to get, so if and when she came back, she wasn't having to deal with the resistance kind of being struck down by the First Order. So he just was main focus and main motivation for most of the movie was trying to make sure Rey was safe and that she got away from all the craziness. So it was interesting when the whole kiss thing happened. It was, like I said, it was off-putting. I didn't necessarily see it coming. I didn't feel like it was totally earned, but I could see it from her side. And then, him realizing, wow, she really almost sacrificed herself for me. And at the end where he kind of covers her with the blanket, in his concern. I thought it was a little interesting because I definitely thought in The Force Awakens, Rey totally friend-zoned Finn. It came across a little different, and it felt like when she saw him with Rose that she was a little bit jealous, and she kind of came off as feeling friend-zoned. I don't know if Rian Johnson purposely made it ambiguous for us to kind of, that's something for us to kind of look at going into the next movie. But then they had a really unique scene too where Rey meets Poe, and you could definitely be like, Poe was like, hey, she's a looker. Hey, my name's Poe. I'm a pilot. I'm a flyboy. So it's interesting. Is it going to be like and then with everything that kind of went down in the movie between Rey and Kylo, like, I don't know what's going on with Rey, but she could be with 3 different people potentially, at the looks of it. So it's going to be interesting romantic wise where all this is potentially going and with who, and if anyone's going to get shipped out of anybody in this whole mess of people. It'll be interesting to see how JJ picks up since he's coming back to do episode 9, where some of this stuff that's kind of put out there relationship feeling wise will go. But I definitely felt like it was so kind of weird that it definitely seemed like her feelings for Rey were way different towards Finn when she finally got a chance to see him. And like when she hugged him, that's the most, because I'm going to talk about Rey in a second, it seemed the most calm and at ease that she had been in the whole movie. When she was hugging him and seeing him, it just put her spirit and soul kind of like at ease, because it seemed like throughout the movie, and I don't know how I felt about Daisy Ridley in this movie. I love her in Force Awakens as the Rey character. In this movie, it was kind of off-putting. She just seemed so much more full of rage, and she's very conflicted. And we saw just a more darker side to Rey than what we got in The Force Awakens. And I don't know if this is just for me only seeing the movie one time. I need to see the movie again to see how I feel about her performance, but I didn't on first viewing. I didn't like her performance as Rey nearly as much in this movie as I did in the first movie. For whatever reason, it did not land the same for me, and that's the only off-putting thing I could say about any of the performances. I thought everyone from top to bottom did a wonderful job. I thought Andy Serkis did a wonderful job as Snoke. John Boyega as Finn did a great job. I love what Oscar Isaac did with Poe. Just good performances. Carrie Fisher I thought was a lot better and more comfortable in this movie than she was in Force Awakens. Mark Hamill was phenomenal as Luke. But her performance, which to me it was one of the most important performances, just didn't land the way I wanted it or expected it to land with me coming out of the theater. That was the one acting performance that left me kind of excuse me. Now to talk about let's talk about Poe. I like that they gave Poe a bigger role in this movie. They really got a chance to flesh out his character, and it was good because we all know from what we heard in interviews and stuff in The Force Awakens, he was supposed to die at the beginning of Force Awakens, but Oscar Isaac fought for the character, wanted to be a part of this trilogy. So that's why his role was so reduced in the first movie and why he was off screen the majority of it. So they had to give him something bigger in this movie, which they did. I like the storyline. Him and Holdo, Laura Dern's character, the back and forth they had going on once Carrie Fisher was kind of sidelined for part of the movie. I like it. They're grooming him to be the new leader of the Resistance for sure. That's being set up. They do have the Poe Dameron comic that Marvel's been putting out since the release of Force Awakens that gives more backstory. I haven't read any of the Poe Dameron comics. I have talked about and reviewed some of the other Star Wars comics. I'm going to talk about that in a minute when I get to my thoughts after the movie about some of the supplementing materials out there to read that can enhance the movie experience. They gave him more to do. They gave him a bigger role. You're definitely seeing he's being groomed to take over as the leader of the Resistance, and I kind of like that. And he really made a huge mistake with that beginning scene where Leia was like, pull back. He wanted to take out the Dreadnought. They lost their whole fleet of bombers. You know, it ended up leading to Rose's sister in that last bomber that actually took down the Dreadnought dying. So he made a big mistake. He messed up big time. And it was good that it was consequences. Leia slapped his face and demoted him. And then when everything happened with her, and she was sidelined from when the First Order shot her ship, and that whole crazy scene. And that scene works for some people, don't work for others. I'm kind of just in the middle on it. I was indifferent to the hull being blown and her and General Akbar, being blown into space, but then her using the Force to come back. I wanted to say Mary Poppins. When I saw it, it was a weird scene. I don't hate it. I don't like it. I don't hate it. I'm kind of like in the middle. Like, it happened. It was something that it happened. It was kind of cool, but kind of weird. A little out of place, but it's the Force, and the Force we've seen a lot of crazy stuff with the Force at this point. But again, I like that storyline with her being down. I think Poe understanding that he made a mistake and him going out of the way to kind of right that wrong and to make her proud. And it showed his closeness to Leia. I love the little subtle shots of him holding her hand. And, once she, was on life support and when she was in a coma, that he stayed by her side, holding her hand, being there, waiting for her to wake up while all the other craziness was going on that he was trying to deal with, going against and starting this mutiny against Holdo. That he was always still, his main concern was, the overall mission. And it was still a lesson to be learned from it ultimately at the end. But I liked what they did with his character. Even though you felt like if Holdo just would have told him what the plan was, it wouldn't have been a mutiny, and it wouldn't have been a whole reason for the big conflict they had between them. But it was entertaining, and it was a time filler, but it was showing that he's shifting from being just a fighter pilot, like Leia said, that just goes out and blows stuff up, that understanding the role that he must undertake going towards the future of being a true leader, and understanding maybe that's what she's been positioning him for, and the potential that she's seen in him from the very beginning, why she's always had him so close and why she trusts him so much. I think it helped him come to that realization. Now, going on further with Poe, my biggest problem, and I've talked about this numerous times in the Star Wars saga, Skywalker saga movies, we've had myths on how great a pilot Anakin was and Vader was, and we've seen glimpses, but not the way we want to, how they talked about he was a pilot of legend. It never, to me, played out as much on film. We've seen different things in comics and all that kind of stuff where, they've backed it up some. Same thing with Luke. He had a lucky shot in Star Wars. We never saw this phenomenal pilot that they claim Luke was. He was the guy that took the shot that blew up the Death Star in the first movie, but we just never saw the feat of it. We got some glimpses in The Force Awakens with Poe, but they really, with that opening shot where he just flies out against that whole fleet, and he has the crazy little funny interaction with General Hux, and like he just goes ham on that dreadnought, taking out those cannons. Like that was effing awesome. And he turned the stick and flipped the X-wing. Like I was like, that's what I've always wanted. Far as like when they say someone's like that hotshot master pilot, like you saw it with Han and Chewie with the Millennium Falcon. Like that was a piece of junk, but they could fly the heck out of that piece of junk. Poe can fly that X-wing like nobody's business, and they showed it to you firsthand. And it's what I've wanted as a fan to see. If someone got that tag as like that dude as a pilot, like prove it to me. Like I love Rebels, that the animated show where Hera is this heralded pilot, and you've seen her fly every kind of ship imaginable, and she was a phenomenal pilot. Like, prove it to me, show it to me. Like, I need to see that instead of it just being like this myth that never really comes across on screen. And we're like, well, if he was all that good, like, let me kind of see it. And you saw it on both sides, not just with Poe, but even the scenes where Kylo came in flying. Like he could wreck shop. Like you see, like, oh yeah, Vader. From what we heard about Vader, like in Han being his father, like that combination, like he was killer when it came to piloting a ship. You could see like this, the natural instincts like were there. Like he came from that stock. So I'm feeling that for sure, 100%. So it was definitely cool to see those kind of things. Subtle things, but actually seeing why a certain person is good at a particular thing outside of just constantly hearing it. Let's see what else. I want to make sure I hit all the points. One thing that I think was very disappointing in the movie was the handling of Gwendolyn Christie. I love her from Game of Thrones, and she's such a sweet person. And I just feel like she's gotten the short end of the stick yet again. Now, I don't know. I guess she was on screen. I don't even know if she was on screen more in this movie than she was in the first movie. Maybe she was in more scenes in Force Awakens, but time on screen was maybe more in this movie, and she had a cool fight scene. But for all intents and purposes, she won. She thought she killed Finn, and then he landed on the thing and came up and cold-cocked her. And then it appears that she's dead this time. She fell down into the fire and the flames. But we did see her armor was a special kind of armor that she took blaster blast straight to her armor, and it reflected off. So is it a possibility that she could have survived? Maybe. But I'm like, I don't know if I want to see them playing that same trick twice, where like in Force Awakens, we thought she was dead. She was thrown in a trash compactor. Then she shows up in this movie, and then she shows up, and then she dies again, and then she shows up in the next movie. I don't know. Time will tell. I thought they would definitely do more with her character because, they had the Phasma novel that came out. It just recently came out. And they also that talked about her past and how she got in with the First Order and got to the rank of captain. And they also had the comic book miniseries Captain Phasma: Journey to the Last Jedi that talked about how she escaped the trash compactor and how she got back with the First Order after the events of the Force Awakens, which I haven't had a chance to read yet. It's so much reading material, out there. So many things that I want to talk about with the movie. I just want to make sure I cover everything quickly. I mean, the different stuff with Luke and the end scene of the movie, again, was phenomenal. But people have talked that stuff to death. It was just those other little talking points I wanted to key in on. If it's something particular you want me to talk about, always, you can hit me up in the comments, email me, whatever, and I can always address those later. But those were the main points of the movie. Like I said, by no means the movie is not perfect. He made some bold choices. How he handled answering the question about Finn's parents and, is that really true? Is it, or was it a manipulation by Kylo? I want to say this as well, too, about Adam Driver as Kylo. I feel like his character evolved so much. He's fully realized now, not so, I remember when I did my first initial review of Force Awakens, excuse me, that I said he was kind of like came off as a whiny, spoiled brat. You have some flesh they added some meat to make him a fully realized 3-dimensional character, and that he's just evil. Like, screw it, he wasn't. Snoke might have manipulated him in the beginning, but we clearly saw that he was playing Snoke because he cut that sucker in half real smooth with that lightsaber. And Snoke dead, because if he was so powerful, and they really showed that Snoke was powerful, like on a whole nother level, will he not be back in some form to exhibit anything, or is it just Snoke is done and our big bad going forward is just Kylo? It's interesting to see, and that he's just that far gone as that I don't think he can be redeemed. I think it's pretty clear at this point that he's not going to be redeemed as a character. Yeah, I like the way they teased it after he killed Snoke, but showing him and Rey as the yin and yang fighting against Snoke's guards, and that scene was like freaking awesome. The action scenes were so well done throughout the whole movie. I like the end scene with Kylo versus Luke, though it was a force projection. I thought that was kind of cool. And I'm interested to see Kylo as Supreme Leader now, the First Order, how everything plays out in Episode 9, and we don't know. We don't really know where anything is going. It answered questions, and it left just as many questions to be answered. It wasn't like plot threads dangling to be like, we know this and this and this and this is going to happen in the next movie. Like, we really don't know what's going to happen at this point, and we got 2 years that we have to wait before we find out. And I think it'll pass because sooner than we think, because we, just in 6 months we got the Han Solo movie coming out. We still have it's rumors going around, or they did announce that it's going to be an Obi-Wan movie, or they are talking about it's going to be an Obi-Wan movie, and there's going to be some more movies announced coming up probably in the new year. But Han Solo's in the can. That's being edited now. That's going to be out in May or June. But again, as far as the only other movie that we know about is Episode 9, which is December of 2019. So, some time. I don't know if another anthology movie after Han Solo will come out between now and then. I'm thinking so, because pretty much they're hitting a movie a year at this point. So, well, no, maybe not. Maybe not, because if we just got The Last Jedi, then in 6 months we get Han Solo. Maybe that will be the only movie for 2018, and then boom, 2019 we got the Last Jedi. So maybe that's right, and then we'll have whatever that's going to be next announced coming after in 2020. So we'll see. We'll see, but it's definitely a lot of stuff that we do know that this Rian Johnson trilogy is going to be starting up at some point. Maybe that's the 2020 movie that'll be coming. The live Disney streaming service going to be launching in 2019, and they've already said it's going to be a live action Star Wars show there. I don't know if it's going to be the long rumored show that George Lucas had wrote all the scripts for, that he wanted to put out about like the underworld and the bounty hunters. I don't know if it's going to be that, because they said it was like 60 or some odd completed scripts that they had like in the can, that they had super talented TV and movie writers write, that they had all set and ready to go, that have just been sitting for years now. So I don't know if that's going to be that, or it's going to be something totally different. So it's a lot of stuff on the horizon that we have coming from the Star Wars franchise that remains to be seen, that's coming up. So a lot of tasty goodness to come. So if I want to break down for you guys the rating of this movie, if I look at the acting got an 8 out of 10. Like I said, the biggest attraction from the acting for me was Daisy Ridley, and I had to take off a couple of points for that, because it just didn't sit as right. Like I said, it might change and repeat viewings of the movie, but as of right now, she was the worst performance for me in the movie. Everybody else, to me, excelled and did a wonderful job. Casting, 10 out of 10. Great job and great additions. Direction, 8 out of 10. Like I said, Rian Johnson took some risks that were very ballsy. Not everything landed 100%, so 8 out of 10 for the direction for me. Special effects, 8 out of 10. I felt like The Porgs especially, and some of the Canto Bight stuff was hit or miss for me, so took off a couple of points for that. And overall, the story is a 9 out of 10 for me, which averages out to an overall rating of 8.5 out of 10. So this is definitely a solid movie, very entertaining movie. It was very funny, even though it was dark overtones to the movie, as anyone can see from the trailers. It had a little bit more comedy than I expected in it. Not all of it landed on the nose, but a lot of it caught me off guard too at the same time. So I really enjoyed it. Highly recommend this movie. If I had to rank the Star Wars films at this point, coming off of this movie, based upon the first viewing, I still say the worst movie in the franchise is Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, then Revenge of the Sith, then The Phantom Menace, then Return of the Jedi. Next for me is Rogue One. Then next is Star Wars A New Hope. The next is Star Wars The Force Awakens. And then The Last Jedi. And then again, Empire Strikes Back is still my all-time favorite Star Wars movie at this point. It still holds the crown. But I did like like I said, it was the most shocking Star Wars movie that I've seen in a while. And I like the fact it made me think walking out of the theater. It wasn't cookie cutter by any means. So I think it was the most shocking of the movies that are on this list of them all, just with some of the things that happened and how things were handled. Again, upcoming, we have Han Solo and then Episode 9. And like I said, it's talks that they might announce Obi-Wan movie. Again, announcements probably will be forthcoming in the new year about what the next couple of movies probably will be in the Star Wars franchise over at Lucasfilm, so that'll remain to be seen. Now, it's tons of supplementary reading material that's out there that you can check out related to The Force Awakens and as well as The Last Jedi. With this trilogy, we had the comic series Shattered Empire that was on the road to Force Awakens that came out by Marvel, that talks about right after Return of the Jedi, and we get introduced where that story is important. We're introduced to the whole Force tree thing that we see on Act 2 with the Force tree. We see Luke looking for those, and that the Emperor had some, and he took 2 seedlings, and I don't know if one is the tree that we see in Act 2 or not. And then the other one was actually given. We're introduced to Poe's parents that both participated in the Battle of Endor. His mom, Poe's mom, was a pilot, and his dad was actually Han's right-hand man on the strike team that he worked with that went on the on Endor with him. So both of his parents were in the Resistance, and Luke actually gives his Poe's mom the Force tree when she retires from the rebellion, and she goes to her and her husband go off to start their life and to raise Poe. Poe's already born by this point in this story, but he's living with, I think, her father on Coruscant or something like that, if I remember correctly. But they're going to get him and settle down after they did their part in the rebellion and retire, and she's given the other Force tree. So it's important for those minor plot points that you actually get to be introduced to Poe's parents through that series, and you're introduced to the whole Force tree thing via that as well. A recent miniseries that came out that I spoke on earlier is Captain Phasma, that picks up from Force Awakens, and it shows. I haven't read it yet. I want to pick it up soon because Comixology has a huge sale on Star Wars comics right now, so you can get the trade like $2 or $3 off or whatever. So I want to pick that up to read that because I'm curious. So those are 2 things in comics you can pick up, and then they have a ton of books. They have Star Wars Phasma that came out, like I said, that tracks her whole background and her history and how she got involved with the First Order and worked her way up with the First Order. That book was released like a month or 2 ago, leading into The Last Jedi. Then you have the series of books that I think they started right before The Force Awakens and had continued on. It was a trilogy of books. Star Wars Bloodline was one book. well, that's one book, and then it's the series Aftermath. That was a trilogy of books where it was Aftermath, then Aftermath Life, Debt, and Aftermath Empire's End, which covers the time between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens. So you get some history. You're introduced to Holdo in some of these stories as well, and get her connection to Leia and how close they are and how long their relationship goes back. So it's a lot of things you can read. And I'll say this, not all fans are created equal. Not everyone reads all the supplementing material, because it could take forever. You can get lost into it, and you'll never be 100% current. Myself, I've listened to 2 audiobooks based on this stuff. I am a huge fan of the Clone Wars and Rebels. So the Ahsoka book came out last year. I purchased the audiobook and read that, or listened to that. And then it was a book, I can't remember what the name of it is, it's escaping me now, but it was tied to Rogue One. And it has a lot of history about not Jen herself, because she's a young child through most of it, but about Krennic and her and Jen's father, and actually even mother as well, in their relationship, and has a deal with a lot to do with the construction of the Death Star and that whole process. And that was a phenomenal, both of the books, the Ahsoka book and the one that's connected to Rogue One, were phenomenal. So I feel like if you're interested in those things, it only adds to the experience of the movie, because you get a lot of backstory that they might not have the time in a 2-hour to 2.5-hour movie to show all the parts for, but it adds so much depth. I feel like, for me especially, Rogue One is one of my favorite Star Wars movies because of that book. That it touched on so much, that you understand the relationship between the particular characters. It just adds another layer. So it just depends on how deep you want to go in all of this. You can take the movies for face value and just go from movie to movie, or again, it's television shows like the animated shows, like the Clone Wars, like Rebels, and it's stuff with the comics now. And all of this stuff is canon. When Lucasfilm came on under Disney's umbrella, they said these stories from this point on were going to be canon. And so all this stuff just enriches what you're seeing on screen if you want to go there. Or you can just go with what you see on screen. It's a lot more with Phasma. So if you feel like she's underutilized in the movie, it's a whole novel out there and a whole, I think, 5-issue comic series that lets you see her in her glory. So it's stuff there. And so that's why I'm going to seek out some more of this stuff. So there's a lot of different things to handle as being a fan. If you want it, it's there. I'm done, guys. That's all. I think I've rattled on enough about the greatness that is The Last Jedi and all the surrounding stuff. So again, 8.5 out of 10. Highly recommend this movie. Worth seeing. And like I said, it's one of the few movies that I said I kind of want to see again in a movie theater. It can stand up to a repeat viewing because there's so much going on and so many Easter eggs and different things going on in the movie. You definitely can go see this movie twice in the theater to just soak up everything in. So I look forward to the opportunity over the holiday to get a chance to check it out again. If you want to reach me, you can always reach me at the website, comicbooksavant.com. You can follow me on Twitter or Instagram at comicbooksavant. Have the YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/comicbooksavant. If you have a moment, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you haven't already, follow me on social media. And if you have a moment as well, drop by iTunes, leave a review. I haven't had too many reviews recently for the podcast. If you can do that, I greatly appreciate it. It helps get it up in the rankings and help just get it out to more people. So it just helps with the exposure of the podcast. Again, if you'd like to support the show, if you go to comicbooksavant.com, I have links to my Patreon page. If you want to do a one-time donation, you could do that via the website as well. If you want to support, it's a support link and it takes you to different ways. And if you can support financially, that's a great thing. If not, like I said, by leaving a review, following me on social media, all that stuff, all those things help because you can, share links to when I drop new episodes and things like that, or recommend the shows to different people. any of those things help grow the show. And that's my main objective at this point, is to get it to many comic fans' ears as possible, exposing them to the YouTube channel. Again, I'm doing weekly videos. That's just as consistent as I am with the audio show with that at this point. I have a lot of big plans for 2018, but I need your guys' support. So even though you've been hitting it, I need you guys to hit it even harder. Finishing up this year strong and going into next year. So I want to expand this out and do even more than what I've been doing. So I appreciate you guys for a wonderful year. I'm going to try to do one more audio episode before the year's out. If I don't, I will see you guys next year, first week in 2018. I'll have a new episode, probably a year in review, and just try to talk about some of the plans I have going into the new year. But I want all you guys to have a safe holiday. Enjoy your family. I'll see you guys in New Year. Have a happy New Year. And that's all I have for you guys. Take care of yourself and have a happy holiday. See you in the new year from the Comic Book Savant. Take care.
And into lyrical wholeness, and